goza como gozo yo. Amigo, goza como gozo yo, Armando. Y así lo vamos a despedir de él. Gracias.
Whenever you want to talk to Armando about politics or life or where you're from or what's your background, he'd always start with, I'm a human being. Yo soy un ser humano. And, you know, kind of when you think about that as a starting place for communication or dialogue, well, that's something we all are, you know. And not that the guy was like Yoda walking around with all these pearls, but really he lived and incorporated a lot of things that allowed him then to, as he walked the streets, and you saw that, walk the streets at an airport or at a music store, at a restaurant, like a magnet. People came to him. I know you, I recognize you, you know, that face and that image.
You know, he wasn't a formal teacher, like he didn't teach classes and he didn't have formal training, but he was a master player. And if you sat down and asked him any question, he'd explain it to you in a very scientific way. Santos, you gotta play inside and outside the drum, in and out of the drum. Okay, what do you mean, Armando? Well, you have to play, you get all the sound with one drum. You gotta play the surface of the drum, you play on this part of the drum, you play with this part of your hand, you use the bass tone, you tilt the drum, you play around the rim, and he's just basically talking about all the colors, all the sound that the drum has. You gotta use all of that when you play. And he was a master at that. Like you listen to the old recordings he did where he'd play one drum even, and get a lot of sound out of one drum, and full, beautiful sound, beautiful different range of slaps, beautiful bass tone, muffled tones and open tones. And he did the same thing with the bongo.
From Cuba, where he changed how the bongos were perceived, how they were used in performance, in recording.
I always wanted him to play bongos every night because his little mallets were just superb for the sound of that instrument, which I'm sure the people at LP know and love to hear him play.
You don't hear bongo players that often getting so many tonalities out of the instrument as he got. He was like a piano player on the bongo, and he'd use different combinations of fingers.
And he played bongo, but he hardly ever played cowbell. I don't know why. He didn't like playing cowbell. So one time I saw him, he played cowbell, and when I saw it, that's how I play cowbell now, because most guys play cowbell, they play like this, they move the bell. He held his bell straight, and he just played the stick part. And ever since then, I watched him play, I go, that's the way I'm gonna play from now on. That's just the way I still play.
I remember Armando in 1976, I was an invited guest. There was a lot of my colleagues, Ruben Blades, Eddie Palmieri, Tito Puente, Dave Valentin, Papo Vasquez, etc., etc. There was a lot of musicians. We were invited to, there was a pier on the West Side Highway called the Dr. Pepper Pier. 1976, Armando invited me as a guest to play congas, and I was honored by Armando saying to me, Eddie Montalvo, you can use my drums. I was like, what? Armando was a gentleman who honestly would not lend his drums out to anyone, but he told me, Montalvo, I like you as a person and I like the way you play. And that to me was heaven coming from Armando. And from that experience that Armando said to me, Eddie, I like the way you play, has stayed in my heart and will stay in my heart forever.
I'd like to ask a question if possible. I think that what impressed me so much about your playing is, number one, you had the tone, number two, you had the speed, and number three, you were very animated in your playing. In other words, I seen you hitting the conga and catching the sound at the same time. Wow! Taking your hand, whoa! And lifting it up. Taking your hat off, swinging it. How did that help your career, if any, or is that something that you wanted to do within yourself?
No, it's coming with no intention.
Beautiful.
You understand? It's an emotional thing.
Exactly.
You see, you can never explain to that.
You can't explain it.
That's right, because what happened, Perazo, we all love to have a, what you call, technically approaching.
Exactly.
All right? But the interior expression disappears.
That's right. That's right.
It's disappearing. So you have the interior expression, you know, to say it's like a freedom
Exactly.
that you have. If you're willing to articulate that,
Exactly.
you know, because the other way, you play and you think too much. You don't have to think, you have to play.
Exactly.
So if you asked him about specific stuff, he would explain it to you. He could tell you. He'd tell you, no, you know your hand like this, but he had a real technical approach where he'd do very subtle things with his hands. You notice in a lot of photos that he's in, it looks like he's dancing flamenco because his fingers will be in certain positions, and it's because he'd use different combinations of fingers for different sounds. So he was a great teacher, and he knew a lot about the history of the instrument and about the music, about all the old players from the old times.
Mongo and Potato and Armando, Candido, they did it. They were game changers.
Another thing he would do is that he wouldn't tune his drums, his bongo or his conga. I never saw him tune a drum ever. And he would get the most beautiful sound of the drum wherever it happened to be tuned. So I was trying to ask him which drum you want to use so that I could tune it up for you. You know, I wanted to tune it in relation to the other drums we were using on that track. Harold Muñiz and I and Mateo were playing on that. And so he goes, no, he went in and he started playing. And I go, Armando, which one? He goes, just record. So we start recording, and he used both quintos, and they were tuned about a half a step difference. They were, you know, it was not a tuning that you would do intentionally. It was like king, 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 and he used both. And it's beautiful. It's on the recording. When you hear it, you wouldn't think he's using two quintos. It sounds like he's just getting more sound out of one quinto. But it's something I never even heard of anybody else ever doing. You know, playing two quintos that are tuned almost the same at the same time.
But his technique on the conga drum, especially when he came down near the end, when he put his elbow on it and brought the tones differently. He had a solo every night that he was in Santana. And I think he had a solo every night that he was in any band.
I can recall one of my favorite memories of my grandfather was actually when first met Martin. Seeing their connection and how much respect. I think that was the first time I really realized what a legend he was, being at the non-music show and seeing all the Latin percussionists kind of revere his image in a way. And I could tell that he was really respected, and I always knew he left an amazing legacy and was a legend, but I think that was the first time that I could really tell that he affected so many people's lives.
I made a lot of people very happy. You know, he was proud of that notion that total strangers knew with a smile. That's the guy that made me happy, you know? He liked that. He was proud of that.
With his music and with his personality and with his touch and with his message. And it was a great time back in Anaheim, California. Like I said, one of the greatest memories was just seeing all the musicians interact with him and telling me how much of a legend my grandfather was.
Armando lives on through Jaleel. He's a spectacular young man, as well as Jahaira. She received a full scholarship at Cornell University. Brilliant child. Adriel, the oldest, is a graphic artist and beautiful person. And Tracy is a force of nature, spectacular woman. Tony Williams, their father, used to be a singer with Kanye West, and beautiful voice and beautiful person. It's a beautiful family.
Amigo, los rumberos de mi tierra. Amigo, ahí, goza como gozo yo. Amigo, goza como gozo yo. Armando, goza como gozo yo. Amigo, goza como gozo yo.